Hi, this is the Dr. Deborah Show, and this is a show where we talk about bringing peace and calm into your life. Today, we'll be talking about mental health and mental health stigma. We're live at KCSB FM Santa Barbara 91.9. KCSB is a platform for cultural expression and thoughtful discussion, providing a diverse educational forum. I'm a Santa Barbara-based clinical psychologist, and I specialize in pediatric neuropsychology. And during my clinical training and my current work, I've treated thousands of people, and I want to share my experiences with you. I'm also a UCSB alumni, and I live locally in Santa Barbara, and this show's all about our community and how to create compassionate conversations about our well-being and health. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about mental health and well-being with a focus on music and sound with our very special guest, Chris Pelonis. Chris Pelonis is a musician, engineer, producer, singer, songwriter, and closer to home, he might be even known as Chris the martial arts guy or Chris the surfer. And also, he's Chris of Chris and Pits BBQ sauce or Chris the choir director. So he has a wide variety of talents. But Pelonis, he grew up in a musical family with an aunt who was a prodigy on piano and a grandfather who played flute and a mother who loved Sinatra. His grandparents owned a restaurant in Hollywood, and they created Chris and Pits BBQ sauce. He was surrounded by music and support, and one of his earliest memories goes back to when he was age 4, and his sister brought home a nylon string guitar, and he stole that from her, and he never gave it back. And Chris Pelonis has been described as a kind, loyal, and sincere, compassionate man who was raised by compassionate parents. And he gives his time freely, helping raise money for mudslide victims in La Conchita near his home. And he also puts in extra hours designing world-class studios. And for the entire time Pelonis has been designing studios, he's also been acutely focused on the interconnection between room and speaker. And over the past 30 years, he's designed personal studios, commercial facilities, mastering suites, and film stages for clients that include Skywalker Sound, Future Disc, Jeff Bridges, Glenn Phillips, Disney, Third Eye Blind, Sony, PlayStation Studios, and more all over the world. So music is the bedrock of nearly everything he does, whether on stage or building a studio space. And we're here talking about mental health stigma today because in recent news, did you know that mental health is the largest public health priority, and it's also the largest financial burden of any health issue in the world? That's according to the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum. And in the Centers for Disease Control report called Attitudes Towards Mental Illness, they found that stigma and embarrassment are two of the top reasons why people with mental health issues don't seek help. And I always just like to reinforce before I start on the show that issues of mental health surround people from all walks of life. I mean, we all have different, days that are better and worse. So I just like to reinforce that. And I think of mental health as when we have kind of a physiological balance, meaning our heart's beating at a nice rate, our thoughts are more peaceful, and that gives us kind of a sense of inner peace, just to put it simply. But I was wondering, and also I want to welcome Chris because I didn't do that. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So I'm so happy to have you here. And I was wondering how you would describe mental health.
Mental health is in when it's healthy?
Whatever you would think of when it comes to mind, when you think of mental health.
Well, I think oftentimes when people hear mental health, they often associate that with something being wrong. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the default, maybe because of the media and so much attention put on it. And but I think what you said earlier was peaceful. Everything's in sync. I'd say when I feel the healthiest mentally is when I'm completely relaxed and I'm not preoccupied with anything external. I'm just in the moment. I'm happy. Mm-hmm. I'm noticing things around me. I could be outside. I could be in here. I could be looking at this foam sound absorber. And if I'm really in a good place, I could start appreciating the artistry and how it was created and why it works. And I could, detach myself from the fact that I'm interviewing, or maybe I had an argument with somebody, or I'm pissed that somebody's late delivering something for one of my projects. All those things that sort of cloud you and tend to get you off that track of tranquility. So I would have to say, if I'm being mentally healthy, everything's calm, everything's relaxed. That's my state of mental health.
That was a great description. I think that's true, because I think when we are truly present, like you're saying, where we kind of arrive and we can let everything slip away, which is very hard for most people to do. But it's true, you can kind of have like a Zen kind of moment, right?
Completely.
It's hard to let our distractions go. I think that's probably, I mean, that's why music is really healthy too. And I like what you brought up too, which is the point of when I asked you, what is mental health? I mean, we've gotten so fixated maybe on the term, but if we think of our general health, we don't question that. But it's true, maybe we need to come up with a new label. Maybe it shouldn't be.
Well, it does carry a stigma, I think, a little bit, because there is a lot of mental unhealthiness, if you will, or illness, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
And when you think of health care, for example, you think of doctors and you think of when you're ailing from something, right? So I think it automatically takes you there. I think it would be nice if people thought of mental health as in like what we're describing, something a little bit more tranquil. And I think part of the problem is to get to that place is not that easy. And if you aren't aware that maybe you have some things blocking you, I'm not going to try to play psychologist here. I'm just speaking from my own experience with people around me. I think that people turn to things that aren't so healthy, drugs or alcohol or obsessions, things that'll get them away from dealing with their stuff.
I mean, I think we all have distractions.
I almost got you in trouble with the FCC right
there.
Oh, no.
Okay. We're talking about, we're not supposed to say any bad words. No, it's true. I think that, but, really it's like waves in the ocean. I think we're going to have, lots of distractions and bothering, events in our life that are stressful.
How you deal with them.
Exactly. That's why I've gotten really into mindfulness meditation, because I find that even, if we just notice if we're even breathing, right? Because we usually hold our breath when we get stressed out. So, and also I think nature is really powerful for our well-being, but we've kind of disconnected maybe from that as well. So.
Also being alone. This is something I don't
you're
mean
fine.
to interrupt
You're fine.
But, I'm very remote. And when I first started living like that, I kind of freaked out a little bit, because I couldn't just go run down to the local coffee shop and get a cup of coffee and see people and maybe talk to somebody, which can take you away from dealing with whatever it is that you should be dealing with on a daily basis. I don't think people spend enough time, generalizing, of course. For those of you out there who do spend a lot of time alone, I'm not talking to you.
No, I think most people don't like to be by themselves. I actually think that's something that, you can cultivate. I grew up in San Luis Obispo, so I'm kind of a cowgirl a little bit. So I think being with the animals and stuff is very grounding. But I think most people don't like being alone. And like you're saying, we get accustomed to filling up. If we get a little anxious or we get a little nervous or stressed out, then we think, okay, I'll run and buy myself a shirt or go see somebody. But, actually the best, most powerful gift you can give is make friends with yourself, right?
It takes a little time.
It takes a long time.
It took for me to really be comfortable, out there in the wilderness, completely alone. It took me some years, actually. And I had a lot of those conversations with myself, because it was like I had nothing else to do but to have all those thoughts come up. And it's like, oh, how do I really feel about this? I'm still carrying that? Heck, I didn't realize I still was even thinking about that. But apparently I am, because here it is, right?
Right, when we get in a quiet place. That's why silent retreats a lot bubbles up.
Totally.
So how did you deal with those bothersome, because usually when people have a bothersome thought and they're by themselves, like you're saying, I think they'll get a coffee or something, but then what you're saying is you practice kind of listening to yourself and then and answering, kind of having a conversation, which is really healthy.
Yeah, I tend to, and I don't know if everybody's like this, but I'm very solution oriented. So.
Well, I think men definitely are more solution oriented.
Maybe.
I think they are. I think women tend to be more, not to generalize, but I think men like to fix things in general.
Yeah, you got to find the answer. It's like I didn't like the feeling I was having of having this stuff that's unresolved, and I couldn't get away from it.
Right.
Really. I mean, I suppose, I'd go for a hike, but even then it was like I'd be hiking and I'd be thinking
exactly. Well, that's what I tell my patients is you can be in a room with 1,000 people and you can feel totally alone because you have to listen to your own thoughts and your own heartbeat and, and the uncomfortabilities. But like you're saying, if you practice that, you can kind of master it. So it can actually be very rewarding.
I feel like I've grown quite a bit by living out there, and I've had, like everybody, I've had things to deal with in my life, more than some, less than others. But I think if you don't allow yourself and I'm still learning how to do this. I haven't really allowed myself real recovery from a lot of things that I've been through. But I know this, and these are the things that I think about when I'm, alone, or when I'm in a forest or surfing or something like that. It's like, this is part of that recovery I never gave myself. I'm going to let this be part of that recovery. Yeah. And then I may even discover, like, this isn't enough. I need to go, like, camp in the desert for a week or a month.
Do you go do that then? So you kind of listen to yourself?
I do camp. I recently bought a van, and I fixed it up so I can sleep in it.
Nice.
And I'm on these projects, and I have a pretty nice hotel allowance, but I stay at the parks on the beach instead.
Yeah. Well, nature is the best thing. I mean, the waves crashing. I think, though, the key to, like, quote unquote fixing anything that I tell people, come in and say, oh, you need to fix this, or I'm broken, or is really awareness. And then, because there's a lot of things that we don't really want to face. And then how do you treat yourself when you become aware of something you don't like about yourself too? You know what I mean? So I think by going camping, or, taking a retreat, or spending some time making music, or, something like that.
You said something really interesting that I think I'm 60 years old, and I'm just, a lot of this stuff is just coming into focus. I guess I've always been a little slow learner, perhaps.
I'm like that too. It's okay.
I think when you recognize something about you that you feel maybe you don't care for so much, it needs a little work.
Yeah.
And the trick for me is, it has to be something that I believe isn't correct. If I start thinking about maybe other people's perceptions, that's where, in my opinion, it's like you got to let go of all that stuff.
It's true.
It's really about, if I don't care for this particular characteristic that I've developed, fine, I should deal with that. And when I recognize it, know that that's happening, take a note, try to address it immediately, rather than somebody perhaps telling you, I don't like the way you this or that or the other thing. Well, maybe what you're doing is perfectly fine, just not fine for them.
Exactly. Well, it's really about making friends with yourself, and then knowing what you need. And I love the idea, what I tell people too, is have a conversation with yourself. I think about, what does Chris need? How does Chris want to be talked to? How does Chris want to, be treated? I mean, I think that we all need to do that, actually, one-on-one with ourselves, in order to even determine, what is helpful for us. Because we all have different levels of needs too.
Well, when you live alone like that, I talk to myself out loud a lot, and then sometimes I forget.
That you're talking out loud?
Well, I'll come into the world where there's other people, it's like, I'll start to have a chat with myself. It's like, oh, I don't want to be that guy,
But, most people do. I mean, even I'm working with someone now who has a lot of anxiety, so they want to scream at night. And they have a ranch, and I said, why don't you go up to the ranch and do it there, because that's a better, more, it's okay to do it. But they feel so embarrassed that they're even, like, expressing, being loud.
I think it's good. You know what else it is? It's rehearsal. My father, man, he used to rehearse he owned a chain of restaurants, hardcore business, crazy stuff, and he would rehearse his meeting speeches, and he would also rehearse when he was pissed at somebody, and I'd hear him outside, it's like
rehearsing. Yeah,
you think he's like, someone's on the phone, he's yelling, so I walk out there and he's just talking to this person, and maybe he's just venting and getting it out so that he isn't like that, getting out the anger and the frustration and all that stuff, but really venting out all the ideas and the things that are wrong, that are causing things to not connect. And so it's really a rehearsal, just like a musical performance or a speech.
So you grew up kind of with that was okay too, though?
I don't know that I thought it was okay. I thought it was kind of nutty, because he was a pretty volatile guy.
Yeah. Well, Greeks are very passionate. We're both Greeks, so but right. Greeks are very passionate, I think, too. So there is that passion. But I think there's a difference between talking out loud to yourself like that, like rehearsing something and working something through, versus, people have schizophrenia who are talking to themselves, but they're not getting any, they're kind of in a vicious circle round and round. So
I think there's actually two people, maybe.
Or multiple, things going on. It's confusing. But I mean, I guess maybe the point we're both kind of agreeing on is like finding time for yourself and really practicing and learning what is going on with you and just checking in. I think the bathroom is a good place because no one can follow you there. You know, you can lock the door, wash your hands. You know, if you have a hard time even deciphering what is going on, because I think people get in predicaments and they can't even tell what's going on for them.
We're very fortunate in Santa Barbara. You know, there's hiking trails all over the place, and you can really escape quite easily here. You know, even if you go down, there's plenty of beaches. There's something like 90 miles of coastline. Just drive up the coast and pull off in one of those little dirt spots on
Yep.
You know, and
super nice.
Hike down, and there's nobody there, and even if you just sit there for
I do that. Yeah, I even will sometimes take my 12-year-old because he doesn't want to get out of the car, but just to go there and roll the window down and look at the beach, smell the ocean air. And it's true, we do live in a beautiful place. And, you know, even if you're not in Santa Barbara and you're listening, I mean, I think really, you know, you can pretty much even look out the window probably and find a tree or a leaf or something like that. So
there's beautiful things everywhere.
There's beautiful things everywhere.
I try to look at the very first thing that I put my mind to in the morning. My mission is for it to be something beautiful.
Yeah, that's very healthy.
And if I can look out a window and see something beautiful, because that sets the whole tone of the day, really.
For sure.
But the beauty can be like you could just look at your hand and go, what a beautiful creation that is. All the nerves and the skin. I mean,
so cool.
It could be anything. You know,
I do that
bracelet.
too.
Wow, look, there's a little black diamond in there. And then you think about that and you focus on that. And it's like a rudder that sort of trims you into a better place than...
Well, it sets your day to have gratitude, too. I know I like to do that, and I even just look at the sunlight coming through the shutters because I'm just happy we have sunlight, you know? So it doesn't have to be complicated. But, yeah, I mean, admiring, you know, that your aliveness is really healthy. So,
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think we really gave you a good breath on mental health, but I think it's different for everyone, but that you can see there's some universal pieces there. I was just going to talk for a minute about stigma because I like to just explain what stigma is, and I've broken it down into social stigma and self-stigma. And social stigma is where we have attitudes and discriminating behavior that are directed toward individuals with mental health problems as a result of a label they may have been given. And then self-stigma, which is very common, is when a person who has a mental health issue internalizes the perception of discrimination. So if you always thought that people, for example, who were depressed were really weird, then you become depressed and you might internalize that and feel like you're weird. So that's why I'm always trying to work really hard on reducing stigma because I think it really leads to feelings of shame. And it's so important for us to all be able to discuss our emotions, thoughts, and feelings within ourselves. So I'm always just hoping, you know, these conversations on the radio and, you know, when you're out in your day, it's just you can do the same kind of thing. It's just you never know. Maybe there's a reason you meet someone to talk about, you know, something important and share. And so we're here talking about mental health and music and sound with Chris Pelonis. And we were just talking about mental health. Chris, I was wondering, how do you think mental health and music and sound intersect?
I just want to kind of go back to one thing because I have a question for you. You talked about reducing the stigma.
Yeah.
What about increasing the stigma?
What would that look like?
Well, in the case of somebody who maybe, for myself, for example, because I've had some things that have occurred that have caused some impairment, memory issues. I've had 3 craniotomies, radiation treatment, brain tumors.
You're so brave. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's a whole nother story. It's been a very fascinating journey. But because I didn't let it slow me down, I hit the ground running. I'm still running multiple companies. I'm still the overachiever. I get cut zero slack if, for example, I go, you know, I'm sorry, my memory's not the greatest. You know, if I forgot something.
Right.
I mean, a lot of people at my age forget anyways, but I think a lot of times for me, I wouldn't have forgotten had I not. They told me when I had my surgeries that would be the remaining symptom would be memory issues and really strange ones. And I mean, I was just recently in a situation, I was producing a record and I got somebody who's very impatient with me about not remembering some lyrics or song titles, you know, and I said, I really do remember it. I just couldn't remember exactly the title, but this is kind of a problem. But there was no empathy. The anti-stigma.
Right. So what it would have looked like is they would have been more compassionate towards you
Right.
Because they would, well, that's kind of the goal of what I'm trying to prove is more like they would be more educated or more aware that there was a need to be more sensitive to your situation. Is that
even or just recognize it's like if somebody walks in and they have a cast on their leg,
right? It's
and
obvious,
and they're having to catch up.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to go, "Why are you going so slow?" It's like, "Oh, you're
exactly.
Yeah, it's nothing wrong with you. You just have a cast on your leg, or somebody can't reach so high because maybe they're not tall. It's like, well, let me help you out. I understand why you can't reach that because you can see these things. It's a physical thing.
So kind of the answer even in a way to that question is that how do they intersect is that they intersect by, I mean, really what you're saying is that your job and your mental health or your memory, piece, they interact with your job.
Of course.
So you have to have, I guess what you're hoping is that you would like to be around people who are a little more aware of mental health or of memory issues. Would they be more educated, or what would that look like?
Oh, I think that if it actually comes up, and you just simply say, I've got some memory stuff I deal with, but it's not going to impede anything that I'm doing,
right.
other than, what was your name?
Something inconsequential.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
But and I think because it's really invisible. And it might be very real. Like, I'm not making this stuff up at all.
Sure.
But, there's been times where it's just like, oh, that has nothing to do with your memory.
So they blow you off.
It's like, well, it has everything to do with my memory.
Exactly.
My kids really know. And for a while it was frustrating. They'd say, hey, Dad, remember blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't. Like, oh, yeah, you were there. You remember. It's like, I really don't. And now when I say I don't remember, they go, oh, okay. Well, and then they say, well, this is what happened. And they kind of remind me. And so far it hasn't come back to me, but it's nice to hear how much fun I had at some event or something, and they describe it for me, as opposed to saying, "Oh man, how could you have forgotten that?"
Plus, I mean, on top of it, it's already so hard to not be able to remember something, right? And then that's exactly the stigma we were just talking about, where we internalize that. Then it's like, oh my gosh, maybe there is some. Start maybe. I'm not saying you, but another person might start doubting a piece of themselves or feeling like.
I mean, I tend to retreat. I tend to be. Maybe that's why I like to be so reclusive. It's just sort of like, well, if I'm around people less, I'll have less of those situations.
Well, do you think? I don't know. I like to be reclusive because I like to regroup. Kind of recenter myself.
I do both. I like to stay away from the situations.
Yeah.
And I've become much more selective.
Right.
People that I'm working with, people I'm around, people that I'm friends with. Just not for any other reason than I know I'm really good for certain types of people and they're good for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be around somebody who I'm not good for, and perhaps my way of working or personality or whatever isn't really resonating. It's like, okay, good. I know that now, so let's go somewhere else.
Well, I mean, do you think you could have said something to that, or you still could say something to educate that person so that they might not, because you're not the only person they're going to encounter with issues, that are going on.
I mean, it's the reason I just brought up one, but there's been dozens of people that I've had this. Yeah, this is just, this happens all the time to me on all sorts of levels,
Just kind of blowing off your symptoms and then kind of just saying get over it a little bit,
I don't know that they're blowing it off. I think it's just simply that they don't understand.
Right.
They can't see it, and I don't necessarily like to try to explain it. I mean, if it really comes down to something where they're like, it could be a million different things. It could be a design project, and maybe I misplaced a door on a building or something, in a drawing.
Yeah.
And it's just as simple as I know we had that conversation, but then I lost it when I went to draw it. So I need to, rekindle
Which is, I mean, you're not going to be a robot. So, I mean, it's almost like they have unrealistic expectations, maybe.
I mean, prior to all my tumors and all that stuff.
You had that level of.
I was pretty impeccable.
So they kind of are used to that, you think?
I think I had the reputation of being like that over the 30 years I was doing it. I'd have 12, 15 projects happening all over the world. Somebody would call me and say, what's the angle of the second break in the wall coming off the speaker wall? And I'd go, it's 62.25. And how long is that wall before it hits the next angle? 7 feet 11.2 inches. I just go boom, boom, boom. I just had it.
But people probably get spoiled by that too.
Well, and I did too, because I held myself to that standard, and then I always kind of it might be a little bit of a survival thing too, when you know, like, this is how I've survived and this is why people like me and hire me.
Exactly.
And then you feel that you're not quite at that level anymore.
Right.
You don't really want to say, like, well, I'm not like that guy that I was that you're hiring me for. You know, you kind of have to survive and say, I'm just going to go in, I'm going to do my best, and you don't anticipate. It's not like this happens all the time, by the way. For anybody thinking of hiring me.
No, I mean, I think this happens to all of us in different ways, though, whether you've had something, you know, like a physical condition or a mental condition. I mean, I think we're not perfect. So,
yeah. I know the difference between when it's I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
And when it's this thing. I can actually tell when it's something that got lost because of the surgeries. It
seems like, don't you think the music industry could do more to, like, I mean, I'm sure you're not the only person in the music industry who's had surgeries. Yeah, I mean, or surgeries or...
Most of the people in the music side of things, most, not all, I get cut a little more slack from artists.
Mm-hmm. But the technical people,
but not always. I mean, some artists are... You know, depending on the artist, they can be interesting people too. Right?
See, but I think that that's an important skill for them to have too.
I think it's an important skill for anybody to have, to be empathetic. But, you know, as you know, we're in the world of selfies. And narcissism is like we're creating narcissism that wasn't there before, which depletes your empathy.
Right.
So everyone's all about me and my selfie and how pretty I look on my Facebook page or Instagram, and other people don't matter.
Well, and we already, when you were talking just a minute ago, I was thinking about Alan Wallace, who's my teacher. He works with the Dalai Lama. And I like what he talks about with hedonism, which hedonism is like pleasure seeking, right? And I think we all want certain things and we want pleasure. But actually, it's kind of a skill to really not always be seeking pleasure. And I think that...
Don't touch that mic. It makes noise.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
I'm fiddling with the microphone.
Isn't that what Glenn was telling you?
Yeah. Well, I like to fiddle with the microphone because I'm trying to look at the guest, at you, Chris, and
it's
also...
It's picking you up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, right?
So, well, he knows about the sound.
Let me just make one little adjustment for you.
Perfect. Now my voice will sound perfect. There. I mean, I just think that it's the example he gives is like if I have my cell phone and I drop it down a volcano, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my cell phone. I don't have my cell phone, and everybody's like, oh, sorry about that. No, you'll get another cell phone. But then if it's your cell phone, right, that goes down it, then it's a big deal. Right. But we're very self-absorbed too. So I think we need to overcome that actually as a global culture. Because really, I mean, like the Dalai Lama, he says we're all here breathing in the same air. So at some point, somebody who you're working with will have something that will happen in their life.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And then they won't know how to deal with that. So.
Well, it's important. Empathy, I think, is it's almost a lost art, and I kind of inherited it actually.
Because you're Greek.
Well, my great grandmother was a healer.
Yeah.
On the island of Crete in the Greek islands.
Yeah.
And it's kind of passed down this whole sort of real empaths, which is a thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's a condition just like narcissism, or like a narcissist.
Probably more loving-ish.
Yeah, but it's kind of a bummer.
It is.
Oh,
well, the Greeks and the Romans, like if you go back to the pre-Socratic times, the artists, the poets, and the musicians. I mean, not that I know musicians are definitely revered. But people who were a little different, in a way, those were the people everybody revered. You know, they went and saw the healers, but we've just kind of lost our way, I feel like, because we keep getting further and further from ourselves.
Sure.
And then what we do is we aren't able to be considerate for another person because of the fact that we're, maybe so distracted by our own issues, then we take them out on other people. Because, I mean, I would think if somebody had their own level of just insight to themselves, they would be a little bit more in tune with you.
Probably so. I'd have to agree with that. You know, it's interesting as being an empath, and you probably encountered empaths in your days, right?
It's true. Empathy is a hard skill.
Well, it's a skill, but then there are people who are just
genuinely that way. Yes,
empath, like
for sure.
Just like a real narcissist is a condition; it's not curable, right?
Not unless you go to therapy for like 15 years with the same therapist, but even then it's hard to overcome.
I mean, from what I've understood, this is a great conversation because I was talking to my therapist, and
yeah.
her take was like, is this something it's like asking somebody colorblind to see color?
Well, not in my I mean, I was trained psychoanalytically. My understanding is that if you have intensive therapy for personality disorders get developed from splitting off parts of our personality from traumas and other things. It's like I put it like a kind of akin to a tree, you know, and the tree starts splitting off parts of the bark, and pretty soon the person is very fragile. And they're kind of like the inner core of the tree. And for survival, they do things that are unhealthy, like maybe they have a personality disorder that's a narcissist. But actually, I mean, my training is that, you know, if you go to like ongoing therapy for like 10 years, you have to make a really good relationship with someone, you know, that you can overcome those pieces of you know, of yourself.
Of a real narcissist versus somebody who's just narcissistic?
Right. Supposedly.
There's a difference, right?
Well, yeah, I think after 5 years or so, if you can really thresh through and stick with that stuff, that you can overcome some of those pieces.
That's good news, because I haven't really seen any of that work anywhere. I mean, the people I know that are like that are actual, what I consider true narcissists.
Right.
Everyone's narcissistic to some degree. To live, to survive, you have to have, on a scale of 1 to 10.
Right. A healthy narcissism.
Yeah. But then there are people that are off the scale, and they have no empathy whatsoever.
Right. Well, here, we'll do a little mini. It's kind of good. Maybe someone else is interested in this too, because one of the first things I learned in my grad school is there's ego dystonic and ego syntonic. Ego dystonic is the healthy one, and this relates to personality disorder. So if we are ego dystonic, maybe we wake up in the morning, we feel like maybe a little anxious or depressed or, you know, just out of sorts. But we notice that, one, and then we might go for a walk or eat some kale or call up a friend. So we do something about it. Ego syntonic is the one that's unhealthy. And I think of ego syntonic as like being synonymous with ourself. It's almost like me with me, but not in a healthy way. So everyone around the person could be saying, what is that person doing? And the person's like, I don't know what's even, they're just not even, the awareness is so low because the fragility, it feels like survival, like fight or flight. Mm-hmm. So, but I think actually a lot of mental health things can be overcome through the right fit, persistency, and consistency. But I think you have to have a really trained, well-trained person who specializes in that.
So how do you become numb if you're an empath? Because I can feel people really, like if I'm in a hotel room, I mean, you're
sensitive, yeah.
If something's on the other side, I won't sleep well, and then I come out in the morning and I look, and you know, there's the guy who was cooking meth next door or something.
You're very tuned in.
Yeah, and it's something that I can't really shut off that well. And when I'm around a lot of people, especially if I'm around a lot of people who maybe, you know, have not the greatest
We'll have to teach you mindfulness meditation. That's what I do. Yeah. Like when I'm in situations like that, I've been doing that for about almost 10 years now.
You can shut it off?
Well, I don't shut it off. It's kind of like a seesaw. Like it's an interfacing between being present and then taking care of myself and noticing that conversation of, okay, wow, I'm feeling really upset about what that person's saying or something. But then I might, you know, then I'll do a mindful pause and I'll do a little mini meditation with myself. So I think it's about taking care of yourself.
Well, I've learned a lot about all that, but I know that I sidetracked you from the question about music and art. And
it's okay. We're getting, but you know, it's all kind of interrelated, I think. Okay. You know, so did that help you? Was that?
Well, I was just interested in, you're talking about stigmas and people who maybe not that you want to have a stigma, but there should just be an awareness of, you know, if somebody's colorblind, for example.
It's true. No,
you don't want to go like, if you can't tell me what color that book is, you're a bad person.
Right.
Know? It's like if you can't remember what you forgot, or if you can't, you know, whatever it is, if you can't be happy right now when you're in a state of depression,
right,
then you're a bad person. There's stigmas, but then there's the other side where maybe somebody's very depressed and they hide it because they're afraid of having a stigma.
Right.
And then nobody cuts them any slack because they're not really well at the moment.
That's true.
So there's that whole, so that was really what I was,
right.
What triggered me. That's a funny word now. It did trigger me. I think it's okay to be triggered.
Okay. Triggers, okay.
Triggers are cool.
I teach people about triggers. Yeah. No, I think that it's a great idea. I think that if you had a term for that, that would be a great thing to teach people.
What would we call that? Let's coin the term
we'll
right
have
now.
To coin...
Stigma? destigmatize.
Well, you've like actually have a very like intense experience, you know what I mean? So you would maybe have, and you're good with writing songs and all of that.
Yeah, stigma and anti-stigma, stigmatism. No, that's something different, isn't it?
Well, I guess I'm thinking increased awareness.
Yeah.
Enlightenment.
I think the idea of it being like it's okay to recognize and to be feel accepted and
Healthy
free.
recognition.
Healthy recognition. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Healthy recognition. Yeah.
I think it's hard for other people to recognize in other people what they don't like about themselves. That's what I would say would happen with those other people. Is there something they don't like about that piece of themselves? Like if they become imperfect, then they feel that would be a reflection of them versus like maybe there's something going on like depression or they've been through a surgery or you know what I mean?
Don't you think there's so many people out there though who, regardless of whether it's I want more, attention in this relationship, you're not giving me enough attention.
Yeah.
When maybe the person's giving them a lot of attention and they're just wanting like unrealistic amounts of attention.
Right.
Or something that's not really reasonable to expect from somebody.
Right. Well, that comes, I spend a lot of my day in my practice talking to people about misunderstandings because I think even if we both said the exact same thing, like, I think this microphone is so cool and you said, I think this microphone is so cool. We both said the exact same words, but I might be looking because I like all these little holes and that it's metal and you might like the design or the brand, so even if we were saying the exact same thing, that's why I'm really into like these conversations. Yeah.
It's an RCA.
It's an RCA.
It's a vintage RCA ribbon mic. I'm sure that it probably is the wrong microphone for here. I could recycle that for you and get you a much more modern mic if you don't mind.
Thank you. I'll have to run that by them.
And all the other ones that you have in the building, I'd be happy to.
Aw, you're so nice.
Yeah.
We have these they're like, I think Glenn Phillips said it's from 1957. He looked up the year that it was made, or I don't know. That's what this radio station opened in it was the first of the UCs. So
that is an amazing microphone, and there's people replicating those now, and they're really expensive, even the ones that aren't original. And all they're trying to do is sound like that mic.
It sounds so good.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm glad we sound good.
Yeah.
I hope the one you're on sound. I'm sure your voice sounds
enough.
good. So we're talking about mental health and music and sound, and we were just kind of going over personal, like an experience that Chris has had, and also he was sharing, which is really beautiful, how he, maybe his two worlds, how those two worlds are, and so I think it's just also important, like you're saying, just to keep the conversation about these different pieces going, because I think misinformation and isolation, negative attitudes come from not being able to discuss and having a lack of understanding about a behavior or an appearance of a communication that then someone labels as like not normal, and then that leads to further rejection and increases of mental health conditions and worsening of health.
I have a thought about what you just said about music and art, and I think if you look at so many artists, including myself, like my band accuses me of writing the darkest songs in the world. But, I do deal with anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's pretty significant.
I have that too.
And I write and I express it. And sometimes if you see a painting, and just because a painting's really bright and cheerful doesn't mean that person isn't like, purging something horrible. It's just a way to express it. And for me, most of the time I write these really intense kind of, I guess they're dark,
Do you want to read what you wrote, that quote that you wrote? Because actually, I thought
I could read that. I could read you a lyric too if you want to hear some dark stuff. I'll see if I can't bring you right down.
Yeah, well,
if you're not depressed, I'll get you there.
Well, actually, I think that's another thing. Our society, it's like, oh, that person, don't be so depressing. But depression and anxiety are really a part of life. And they're kind of like a toggle. They toggle back and forth or oscillate. So it's okay. I'm open to whatever it is you want.
So I'll tell you what I was doing, because I'm a photographer, right? And a lot of times I'm trying to really capture the realism, the truism of the photograph.
Yeah.
And there's an art to that. And there's a lot of technology involved in that. I use these very special sensors that do a digital exfoliation that's much more like film, so it looks more like film. But then I thought, well, why don't I just do the opposite? Why don't I just push the envelope and mess this photograph up? So I did, and it looks like that now. That is not really what it looked like, okay?
Yeah. He's showing me a picture of...
I blurred it. It's
a creek, and it has trees, and it's kind of all more melded together in a way. It's kind of like...
I took the clarity all the way down on the post-production. And the idea was to just experiment and to move and to try something that's more and that's different and that's unusual and maybe uncomfortable or unfamiliar. So I quoted this as a letter to myself, and I said, it's the inaccuracies and imperfections that allow for uniqueness and artistry, the natural human desire and instinct to look beyond, to express something deeper and something more, the human willingness to consider and appreciate something unfamiliar. Both the creator and the observer must share in the desire and the willingness for art at a higher level to be conceived, even if they are one and the same.
Nice.
So
I love that.
The point of that is, like, you don't have to please the world. You don't have to be accepted. You don't have to get 10 million Instagram likes on this.
Yeah.
If you're the creator and the observer and you're both involved, is that like a split personality?
No, I love that. I was
kidding.
actually just thinking of Carl Jung as you were talking, because he had a tower he designed, he lived in on the edge of a lake, and he would do, that's very poetic. It's like a blend of your artwork, your thoughts, your feelings,
Sometimes your art can just be for you. You can be both the artist and the the observer.
Yeah.
And if it worked on both sides, if you appreciated and enjoyed creating it, and then you enjoy looking at it back or whatever, then you've given yourself some healing. If the whole rest of the world loves it too, that's great. If you get 10 million Instagram likes, fine. But I think people, there was a discussion about this whole, writing songs and performing in music with always on your mind is like, is this going to get me more likes? Is this going to get me more follows?
Right.
Am I going to get more Spotify listens? That's what's driving everybody. And this is this whole, like, kind of, in my opinion, it's the anti-artist.
I'm actually not doing this. I mean, I don't even know really. I mean, I'm hoping lots of people get help from us talking, but I think people do. They have a modus operandi, and they think, okay, I've got to get to this place, and it's kind of like they lose sight of the meaning of the journey, right? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Completely.
So, and also they don't get to express themselves, and everybody has something really beautiful, in a different way to offer. So you might be limiting yourself if you don't completely let yourself go at times.
When I really let myself go, I write songs like this one I just wrote called Blame It All on Me. And it's, can I recite it? Do we have time?
Sure.
Okay, it says, I don't know how I got here. It's too damn foggy in the rearview mirror. I guess there must have been some rough road by the looks of me from here. I never thought it would be easy. I know nothing comes for free. And I'm sure I earned every scar and every tear I caused to fall. You can blame it all on me.
Nice.
And
then
that chorus is blame it all on me. Yeah, okay. So
do you play the banjo?
I play guitar.
Okay.
I play a bunch of stuff.
So I think I saw you playing banjo, because I went one time to a fundraiser for that school.
I was playing guitar.
Okay.
So the next verse is the one that gets even more dark.
Yeah, it's okay. I can handle it.
Oh, you think that I would learn watching all those bridges burn. Now I'm stranded on this island, washing ashes from this urn. I never thought it'd be this lonely. I was just trying to be free from all the pain and all the blood stain of the broken-hearted, loved ones departed, fights that I started. Blame it all on me.
That's
Cheered
heavy.
you right up, right?
No, it's thought-provoking. No, it got me thinking about relatives. That's the thing with music, is it moves you into a story.
I had 102 fever. I had the flu, and I had just been dealing with a barrage of stuff that I just couldn't handle. It was just too much. It was weighing me down, and it was like, okay, you know what? Everything's my fault. How about that? Here I am. Don't really know how I ended up in the focus of all the crosshairs.
Yeah, I love it. Well, it gives you a place and a space, though, to put that, right? To and also to express it and to hear yourself, and maybe, like you're saying, maybe someone else hears it and identifies with it.
That's happened, actually. A lot of people have said, I find it to be beautiful when someone can, when I see a painting of something that's painful, so you can tell the artist is in a lot of pain. It's like, I really think that's beautiful to be able to express that. And also in artistry, I think when somebody is willing to be so articulate and so precise when they paint, the willingness to take it to that level, that's an expression of pain, I think.
You mean to keep it so precise?
Yeah, I mean, art expresses in so many different ways. Sometimes it's like being loose, and that's sometimes really great. But when you see somebody that's almost like photorealistic painting, that takes such an intense focus.
It's so fascinating you just brought that. I just had this little epiphany I did because I was thinking about my 12-year-old and the art projects, and it's like, I mean, even our culture, we teach people to do that, that everything has to be so precise. My mom was an art director in Manhattan, and she did like package design for Christian Dior and stuff like that. And I think that you do have to kind of be precise, but I love the idea of going out into a landscape and just painting and letting yourself go. But maybe as a culture, we've become a little bit too rigid that way. You know what I mean? Like that if you don't make the soldier the way that the soldier should be, and your soldier's not like everybody else's soldier, in the drawing, it's kind of like that. But that's what's nice about music is you can make whatever words you want, right? It's your own story.
And you can be loose or you can be tight, and depending on what you're trying to express. And like what I said with that photograph was to not be precise and not to be driven to be so perfect and to be something else and to be okay with it being unfamiliar and I'm producing a record right now that's really unique, and the way that I'm doing it is completely different. I don't think anyone's ever done it quite like this.
Which people like unique. I mean, even Margaret Mead, the cultural anthropologist, she said that novelty is the great upward human force. I mean, even going home a different way is really healthy, but we just get going and doing the same thing every single day. So it's really just as another side tip, just try something. If you're listening, try something new and let yourself go.
Do something other than what you think you should.
That's so true. Yeah, I do. I counteract that a lot. So it's a common thing. You can get in your mind like I should be doing this, but really, there's nothing you should be doing. I mean, unless you have to go to a job or something. But otherwise, you might be missing out on the parts of you and getting to know yourself, and then there might be your journey that you're limiting.
Of course, or listening to somebody else's idea. I when I mic drums, for example, I put one mic on the overhead, one on the kick, and one in the room. And these young guys come in and go, I got to have 2 mics on my snare and 2 on every tom. I want 1 on the hi-hat and all these mics on everything. And then they basically blend their levels on the mixing board instead of playing the levels to the song. So they've almost lost the idea of balancing their own instrument acoustically.
Right.
So the first thing I do is I take all those mics off, and they're like, I don't have enough crash cymbals. I will hit them harder. You're not hearing enough crash cymbals because you're not playing.
It's probably like a new music. Do you have people that you train so that your ideas will get transferred to the next generation of people who are doing what you're doing? There's
definitely some young, very, very up-and-coming musicians in this town that I've been working with since they were little kids, and they listened, and they're some of the best musicians on the planet at like 20 years old, 21, 22, so beyond other places, and they really understand this idea of like, well, why not get the acoustics of the room involved? Because being an acoustician, I know how important that is and how powerful it can be, but you have to, like I said, guys go, I want more toms, bring up the toms. It's like, well, there's just one mic. If you want more toms, you got to hit them harder. How about that?
Like in the 70s. You actually have to do it the real way.
Exactly.
I think we've gotten a little too accustomed. It's like we're not in touch with what's actually going on anymore. Yeah. Actually you answered some of my questions, because I was going to ask you how do you think music and sound kind of accepts or rejects mental health stigma? And we were talking about that nude word for actually upping maybe the stigma to be more compassionate and aware of people we work with. And then I was thinking about, what has your work in the music and sound field taught you about attitudes held toward mental health? Do you think that people in the music sound industry, do you think people talk about mental health, or is it just people don't even really, it's just not, I hear you're talking to me about it now because I invited you here, but do you think people in general oh yeah, I going on this retreat or I'm going to go take a break for a month to go, regroup or.
I think artists, if they're real artists, I think that they're pretty open about their stuff, and you can talk freely about, I'm dealing with this or I'm dealing with that, or, I've got, and sometimes it might be a anxiety, a depression thing, or, there's certainly a lot of people trying to escape using things, drugs and alcohol. There's a lot of tragedy, of course, and artists, I think, because they tend to be I'm not saying all people aren't sensitive, but sometimes artists are hyper
sensitive,
and delicate, fragile.
Yeah.
And if they aren't taking the time to go live in a cave like I do, and I'm still.
It's true.
But, then it's like, okay, I have to escape these voices in my head. I need, I don't want to deal, or I don't have time to deal. How do I get away from them? Well, you could just go escape somewhere for a while and work it out.
But I do notice, because I looked up some news, I usually each week I look up news that's relevant, like either globally or locally that's related to the topic. I do notice more musicians. Last week I was talking about anxiety, but I was talking about Big Sean. I think my son knows the song he sings. He's a hip-hop guy. But he actually was very open about just that he was doing his meditation, he was doing everything, and he just reached a pinnacle that he couldn't get, better. And that's what I think the unfortunate part is, that I wish people would just like preventative medicine. My dad's a physician, so I was always trained preventatively, and so if you have a discussion with someone or you notice sooner, wouldn't that be great? Because I think musicians do give a lot, and you know what I mean? And then you're working and traveling, and it's probably very demanding.
Get wiped out.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're touring, if you're on the road.
Yeah.
It's a lot coming at you. It's a lot of work. It's hard.
I'm sure.
But it's, when I'm doing my, the acoustical architecture stuff, I'm traveling, I'm living in hotels, I'm, a million RFIs, requests for information. Everybody's confused. They don't understand. And you have all this stuff. It's a lot like being, putting on a show. Like, you have to get there, you have to sound check, got to make sure that the sound guys and the lighting guys know what's going on and they understand what you're doing and how you want it to sound. And then you have the audience.
Right, there's a lot of people to orchestrate.
Musically or artistically. Yeah.
Do you think that there would be a way that could be a little more smooth, or like it could benefit everybody if it was done a little differently? I know that's probably a big question.
That's an interesting question. I think the answer to that is, if we could start honoring the opposite of what our society and our media has trained us to honor, which is, like, flip that thing on your phone around to take a picture of something else besides yourself.
Yeah.
That was actually one of my posts recently was I said that.
Although I think people, it's interesting, because my PhD is in depth psychology too, I have clinical and depth, and we read a lot of books on perspective and how over time, if you go way, way back, like to Italian landscapes and whatnot, people through art, it's displayed, the things they were taking picture drawing, because they didn't have photography. In those days, what they were drawing became further, and the perspective became further and further removed. So what initially they were drawing was like right in front of them, and then it became further and further and further until we're like drawing rockets. So I think, in a way, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just had this other little idea that relates to that, and I think people are yearning to get back to themselves, and maybe that's like their archaic way of doing it. Is like, oh, here I am, but it's just like not being honest in a way, because it's like maybe your best self or something that's up there.
Well, I think that. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking pictures of yourself, appreciating yourself, and and sharing what hey, look at my new hat or whatever. I think that that's healthy. I'm not saying it's not, but I think that I look on like my Instagram feed, and a very large percentage of the people, it's 100% of the photographs are of them.
Are they
posing and glamorous and look at me and all that stuff and promoting them, and I understand sometimes it's a business, but my thought was, what if you looked at what made you feel better? Like we were talking earlier, like the first thing you put your mind to in the morning. Take a picture of that.
That's what I do. Oh, I agree.
And share it, because maybe it'll make somebody else feel better.
I've been doing that. I've been taking sunrise and sunset pictures more. And I have a whole bunch of garden. And what was interesting was I noticed as I posted those gorgeous sunsets a couple months ago, than other people did. And I thought, that's exactly what I wanted. You know what I mean? But I think we all have to kind of keep doing that too, moving in that direction.
Looking outside yourself a little bit at beauty, and then, and maybe, you know, if you look at yourself and you make yourself feel good and you want to share that, that's cool too. It's like, hey, I made
a blend, a balance of it.
A balance for sure. I think that I'm probably incredibly out of balance on many levels, and I strive to balance, to be in balance. My whole life depends on it as far as my professional life.
Yeah.
As an acoustician, it's all balance.
Well, and it's a nonstop process. That's what I did my research on. And we call it dynamic regulation. You know, but I mean, you know, we kind of need to do that to be ultimately like super healthy, like all day long. Like you're kind of I call it recalibrating, which is maybe a musical term, but you know, we kind of are, you know, but if you're healthy, otherwise we can lose track and we just kind of disconnect and it's like a runaway train.
And if you're using something like a cigarette, to recalibrate, or
then that would be not
a beer,
healthy.
A cup of coffee or something. And I think a lot of people, I mean, I tend to use coffee a lot, and it's if I'm, instead of dealing with something, I just need a cup of coffee. It's like, I probably don't really need a cup of coffee. I probably just need to
take care of yourself. Yeah, I know. I've tried the coffee thing because everybody does that, but it makes me feel funny. I think I'm too honest with myself because I just
makes you feel funny.
Well, if I drink too much of it, I just think going outside is better for me. And then if I really am that tired, maybe I should lay down and take a nap for half an hour or something. You know what I mean?
Going outside is definitely better for you than drinking coffee.
Yeah, but I mean, we all are doing so much. Well, and I'm always trying to imagine a world where like each person has the opportunity, you know, towards self-peace and through this ability to overcome mental health barriers. And I was wondering how, we have a couple more minutes and I was going to ask you just maybe one or two questions. I was wondering, how do you think that music and sound intersect within our community? And like, how could we put more music and sound into our lives to help us create more mental health? Those are big questions, huh?
How do we? Well, I mean, it's sort of an oxymoron for me, a little bit oxymoronic, because I think that a lot of these streaming services, you know, they make so much music available to you, like Spotify or Apple Music, but the artists, like, they get nothing. You know, you get 1 million plays on Spotify. That's good for about $3,000. And it probably costs, if you were hiring PR people and promotion, it probably costs you $30,000 to get that.
So our musicians, they're not getting...
Musicians are getting so ripped off constantly.
They?
And at one point, there was this, you know, the Napster thing. It's like, well, why should I pay for it? I can just get it free.
Right.
And there's all sorts of ideas, like people will go out and spend $6 on a cup of coffee that's gone.
Right.
But they won't spend $1 to download a song that really changes their life, perhaps.
I do that, yeah.
You buy it for $1?
Yeah,
okay,
sometimes.
Well, that's great. You're wonderful, because most people won't. They get these $12 a month subscriptions.
Oh, right. Yep, and you can just listen to whatever you want.
You can listen to that song as often as you want, but if you want that person to get $1, you have to listen to it.
It's good to know.
Probably 10,000.
So by listening to more music in our community that way, you're saying that would be good for the music industry's mental health? I think if
you find somebody or something that you appreciate, I think you should put it on your own personal playlist and loop it so it just keeps getting played over and over again. And eventually, that's one thing. The other thing is, I think we could stick up for each other. You know, I think that the artists are not being represented by the people that they're doing all the wonderful things for.
Right.
Including me. I get a lot of healing from music and from art and from everything else. And I think that instead of, you know, going, wow, I got this song, I got it for like less than a penny. Isn't that great? No, that's really not great.
Right.
That's not cool. And what you should be doing is realizing how screwed that is.
Yeah.
And that's not an FCC violation.
No, it's okay. How it's messed up. I know you're saying,
It's completely messed up, and people should recognize that. And we should get our, you know,
maybe in a local level, you could get like some way to instigate that, you know, and then maybe other places.
What about our Congress people? Like, take it to Congress with something that really is important and matters, instead of so much of the stuff that they go and they get on the floor and they fight about stuff that's like...
Well, I was just thinking if there was a way locally even to instigate that and then gets carried out. But I hear what you're saying. So you're saying to support the musicians and their, work that they're putting in by actually
Absolutely.
legitimately paying for the songs, because actually the ramifications of what's going on with like all these other free musics is really affecting.
They're almost free. And I mean, you get a little something. The other thing is live performance. Go see people play.
Right. That's a great suggestion.
Even if maybe they're not your favorite artist, go see them anyway.
Yeah.
Throw $5 in their tip jar.
Yeah.
You'll throw $5 down for a cup of Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
You
so
got
reevaluating.
Some person whose whole life is being bled out on that stage.
Yeah.
And instead of listening to them, you turn around and you're yakking and you're talking and you're making noise, and then you walk right by the tip jar, and wherever they're playing maybe gave them $50 or $100 or something like that, and it takes them, by the time they set up, play, and tear down, it's 5 or 6 hours.
So it's being respectful to that artist and the work he put in, and also just being caring towards someone who's sharing part of their
and
life.
this goes for the business owners too. These places that have music
menus. Yeah.
I mean, these people are working really hard, and they've worked their whole life.
So you could have a music venue, and you could have everybody sign up that comes to the venue that they're going to commit to doing that, and you could have them buy a song that night.
Well, I have a music venue.
No, I'm saying
I own a music venue.
You do? Okay, cool. Well, you could do that.
Well, what I do is that when people come in, I tell them that if they want to talk and be distracting, that they can go outside.
Yeah. Because
this is someplace to appreciate the art that this person is bringing, and the people who are there, for the most part, want to come and listen. If they want to come and socialize and party, that's a different place than a performing art. It's also an art and photography gallery. So it's one of those places where you go to actually really appreciate the artist. That's what you're there for,
To absorb it.
Yeah.
Well, it's another point is maybe people have lost track of like listening to music. Maybe we don't. Maybe we just take that for granted, and maybe we're just being like selfish that way too a little bit, and not thinking about like how that other person made the music and how they need a livelihood.
Well, there's background music, by the way. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having music in the back, and a lot of sometimes I go out and play, and I just play instrumental stuff, and I like that nobody's really listening, because I'm just creating an atmosphere. But then if somebody says, I want to hear an original song, it's like, okay, do you really? Because I'm going to sit here and I'm going to open my heart up to you y'all, and I don't want to do that if you're not going to interact with me. This has to be a two-way street.
Right, so maybe being more attentive to, although I think people really revere musicians.
I've been pretty fortunate that when when people start getting to know my songs, they actually request them and they listen to them.
I remember I went and listened to you and your band. I was sitting quietly listening.
Yeah, no, most of the time it's like that, but this isn't a personal thing for me. I'm talking about
in general. I know.
When I go out and I see how, somebody's up there and they're great, and people are more interested in, hearing themselves talk.
Well, it's the same thing as people going out on their phones and not, you know what I mean? That's why we have to really engage. I think what you're saying is really engage. Yeah. If you're doing something, become present, enjoy it, and engage with the other people that you're with in a way that's respectful and caring, right? And honoring their
what's
experience.
The joke? Let's all go out to dinner and look at our iPhones.
Right, exactly.
You don't talk to each other. You don't care really anything about what is
I
happening.
actually try not to use my phones at all. In fact, there's a word for that, and we just have another minute, but the word is phubbing.
Phubbing?
Someone taught me that word. People teach me lots of words in my practice, but it's like snubbing someone with a phone.
You had one more question, I think.
Well, I was just going to actually ask you if you had any other words of wisdom that maybe you wanted to share.
Ooh. Just care about people and try to be as understanding as you can. It's not always easy because people do some pretty funky things every once in a while.
It's true.
And it's, if instead of being like, I think fear and insecurity drives a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody's doing something that's funky that maybe you feel you're attacked or you don't appreciate, it's usually your fear and your insecurity and, oh man, this person isn't loving me the way I think I should be loved.
Yeah.
Flip that around. Maybe they're going through some stuff. Maybe they're feeling that from you and they're feeling fearful and they're coming at you, and just try to really be as considerate and empathetic. There's the empathetic.
Just reevaluate, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, let's maybe figure out what it is why this person's like this. Maybe they're really hurting. Maybe there's nothing that I can do about that.
Yeah,
but I don't have to react to it as though this person's a jerk, I want to clock him or something. It's
exactly.
like, this person's wounded.
Right. I mean, that's what I try to teach people, is to react or respond more skillfully. Mm-hmm. We don't have to lash out at it, and also you just never know what's going on in someone's life. So,
but a natural reaction, everybody, no matter, I don't care how zenned out you are, you can react. Somebody can trigger you.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, no, but then the next step might be to reevaluate or take a break, or, you know what I mean? Like you're
look
saying,
back at it and go, okay, maybe
reflect.
I didn't react so well to that.
It's a learning opportunity too.
And of course, sometimes it's warranted. Sometimes your reaction is absolutely correct.
Totally. I mean, we all we're allowed to. We're not like flatliners. We're not going to just be an even kill.
No, and there are bad seeds out there.
Unfortunately, but yeah, I mean, there's some not nice people, but there's a lot of nice people actually too. And I'm just hoping that we can keep having more compassionate, conversations, because even it just builds so much more inclusiveness, and we can teach, ourselves and each other. We can learn from these conversations. So I think we can do this by starting to treat people more as equal and reducing discrimination, and also just creating more conversations and a culture that are more accepting of each person and the work we do toward that prevention. So, Chris, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
It's been really fun.
I wish we had another hour. This is,
Well, maybe we'll have you on again.
Okay.
And, I'm always just thinking of ways we can work together, like volunteering, checking in with ourselves, learning about other cultures, getting accurate information from accurate, reliable sources. And I think that leads to understanding, including, and caring. I'm always trying to imagine a world where we can share our feelings and thoughts more freely. So, and then I always like to just give a quick shout out to HopeNet of Carpinteria. HopeNet of Carpinteria is a group of concerned citizens who are working in Carpinteria to provide information, support, training, and advocacy toward mental health. And if you or someone needs help, there's a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week line through Santa Barbara Access. That number is 1-888-868-1649. We'll see you. We'll talk to you next week. And we've been live at KCSB FM Santa Barbara 91.9.